So good day, everyone. Firstly, thank you all for joining today and taking the time out of your busy days. I'm Stuart Hales and I'm your host as well as presenter in today's webinar. And I'm joined today by Alex Nicholson from Scale, with which I'll be introducing shortly. We're here to present next level VDI, secure, scalable and effortless with scale computing and Tenzig technology. But before we get underway, I just have a small bit of housekeeping to go through first. So the slide deck and webinar recording will be shared following the webinar, and there will be also a short Q&A at the end of the session. However, also feel free to drop chat questions in during the session, and we'll try and review these throughout or at the end in the Q&A. We'll also be throwing up some poll questions during the session. It will really help to get your participation in these so we can track and review our attendees' current state of play on these points we cover. So with that said, let's kick things off. So firstly, as mentioned, some quick introductions to Alex and myself. So I'm Stuart Hales and I am a pre-sales engineer for Tenzig, covering the EMEA region. I've worked in IT now for 25 years, and of that 5 years at Tenzig. I come from a support, IT management and product management background and have a lot of experience and certifications in Microsoft operating systems, as well as Cisco certifications and experience around networking and real-time protocols. In past and current roles, I've specialised in VoIP telephony, as well as my time with Tenzig covering a wide range of VDI and DAS platforms. I'm based from our EMEA headquarters in the UK. I'm really pleased today to be joined by Alex Nicholson. Alex, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I'm Alex Nicholson. I am Senior Solutions Architect for Scale Computing. I started at Scale almost a decade ago in support, so very similar to Stuart. I'm based out of our headquarters in Indianapolis, Indiana, racing capital of the world, coming up here soon. So prior to that, I was also at Apple as a support role over there. So about a decade total in IT, but now on the pre-sale side, helping customers with looking for a VMware alternative.
Excellent, thanks, Alex. So let's have a quick look at our agenda for today's session. So we'll cover our joint messages, followed by an introduction of both Scale and Tenzig and what we offer. Then we will have a demonstration of the Tenzig solution, showing a quick out-of-the-box overview of our PeakOS operating system, connecting to Scale environments using either the Parallels client or LeoStream Connect client, and how then we can capture a configuration template from that device and deploy to others, enabling no-touch deployment. So we'll then wrap things up by covering some key takeaways of our joint offering, and then, as mentioned, finally the Q&A at the end. So just a final quick reminder that the recording and slide deck will be shared after the webinar for you to use afterwards. So a quick intro on Tenzig for those that aren't already aware. We've been in business for over 20 years and we're headquartered in the USA out of Phoenix, Arizona, and have our EMEA head office here in the UK with satellite offices in Germany and Australia. And we like to think of ourselves as a one-stop shop hardware and software vendor of thin and zero clients. So as you can see from this initial slide, we offer hardware options for pretty much all use cases, in-house developed Linux-based operating systems, as well as offering Windows 11 IoT support for our own hardware. We also offer repurposing software for traditional PCs and laptops or other vendors' thin clients. And all of these options can then be managed using our Tenzig Manager application, which we'll look at later on. So Tenzig have a partner affiliations program in place that enables us to work with partners more closely and collaborate on messaging, as well as the partner affiliation with Scale Computing. We also have many other affiliations, as you can see here, with various partners that enable us to have regular synchronization on product roadmaps and management, also on closer development collaboration, and we have more easily defined support and escalation tracks aiding Tenzig support teams, along with in-house ability to replicate customer environments for issue replication and validation. Finally, we also have certified sales and technical staff for the different partner and product portfolios. So our joint message, Alex, I'll let you start by talking through our joint message from Scale's perspective, if you want to go.
Absolutely. So yeah, we have been a VMware alternative actually since 2012. So we've been doing this for quite a while. We provide the underlying infrastructure as a hyperconverged infrastructure. So we're providing the compute, the storage, the hypervisor, all from a company based out of Indianapolis, supported by us. So very similar to Tenzig, I'm finding out. It is scalable, as our name implies. You can mix and match the hardware. It's a very simple UI. It's designed to get you out of staring at the infrastructure and focus more on the applications, the end users, whatever applications you need to focus and spend your time on, such as virtual desktops.
Excellent. That's great, thanks. And from Tenzig's perspective, we are a single vendor, as we call it, as a one-stop shop, offering both the hardware and software which make up modern VDI endpoints. So we're fully supportive of scale computing environments, and our thin client hardware supports both our own Linux OS and PeakOS, as well as Windows 11 IoT options. We also offer a Linux-based repurposing OS, which can be used to extend life and reduce costs in replacing PCs, laptops, or third-party thin clients. And again, just to hammer home the same message, all of this is coupled together via our 100% free cloud-ready management tool, the Tenzig Manager. So I'll hand over to you for the next few slides, Alex.
Absolutely. So yeah, the kind of the basis of all this, like I've said, is we are a VMware alternative. So if you're familiar with, the typical three-tier infrastructure that's been around for the better part of 2 decades, this diagram might look familiar, where you have your VMs at the top, your physical host, some networking fabric storage, and then of course your hypervisor, VMware, vCenter, over on the left there. This kind of infrastructure, it's been around, it's very popular, but it's complex. It involves multiple vendors. So we decided to simplify that with this kind of infrastructure, where you take the storage, compute, and hypervisor and supply all of that from us. Those resources are shared between all 3 physical hosts in the node or more. You can scale out, like you said, but everything's highly available out of the box. So very easy to set up and deploy. Next one, please. So a couple key pillars we have, like we've mentioned, everything is simple. It's designed to arrive pre-installed. So when you set up a cluster, you're assigning each node an IP address, and that's it. It takes about 15, 20 minutes to roll out. Creating a VM is so simple that actually I have a video on my LinkedIn of my daughter creating a VM when she was about 4 years old. We like simple. As our name implies, we can scale out. We have this unique capability where we can mix and match the hardware. So we size out for customers for what we currently can expect and their anticipated growth. But if they have some unexpected acquisition or they need to double their resources, we can add in a 4th node to the cluster from a completely different family. So there's a lot of flexibility. You can mix and match storage, chipsets, things like that. We do provide high availability. We have self-healing capabilities as well as backup and replication, all built into the hypervisor. And we also have an incredibly simplified and cost-effective licensing structure. So it's a very cost-effective VMware alternative.
That's great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. On the technical side of things here, we do differ from other hyperconverged vendors. What you see on the left is what most vendors are doing. They're virtualizing the storage. It's not a bad way to go about it. I don't like knocking the competition, but when you have virtualizing the storage or some extra controller VMs you have to support, that involves a lot of extra resources that you can't allocate out to the VM. We're talking up to 300 gig in memory and 12 cores just to keep the lights on. Where we differ is we're that architecture on the right. We run our hypervisor and storage bare metal. Because of that, we only need about 4 gig in memory and a fraction of a core to operate per node in the cluster, and we drastically reduce the IO path the VM needs to write that data redundantly. So because of that, if you can go to the next slide, please. We can fit on these tiny little HE100 chassis you see. Those are actually Intel NUCs. So this right here is an entire server I've got my hypervisor and server grade VMs running on. So we fit on incredibly small form factors, which is great for edge computing, retail deployments, IoT, things like that. Or, pun intended, we can scale up to our 5000 series. I got muted. We can fit up on that 5000 chassis, so 2 U's per node. data center, there's about 10,000 different hardware configs. So there's not a lot of workloads we can't support. It just comes down to sizing. It's the same hypervisor, same feature set across all the families there. And if you could go to that last slide, please. We also have the ability to, I mentioned this, but have backup and replication. So we do use snapshots to accomplish that. We have our own block engine we've custom made in-house, and because of that, we can take up to 5,000 snapshots per VM, up to 7 years retention. There's no impact to the guest, and those snaps are being taken. So it's very different from what the industry is used to with snapshots. Those snaps are stored locally on the cluster, but we can replicate them. And whether that's to another single node, whether that's to another cluster, we have a cloud instance as well. There's a lot of flexibility for not only how do you protect your data, but how do you keep it up and running, even if you're looking at some catastrophic scenarios. And
that's great.
Do it for me.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. So we'll continue now with our focus back on the Tenzig solution, back more on the endpoints accessing the scale environment. So from Tenzig's perspective, we offer a number of operating system options depending on different use cases. So we have our zero client operating system, which is NOS. So this is our most popular operating system, and also it's the smallest image size, but it's tailored to specific platforms. So we only offer 3 variants of this, one for Citrix, one for Omnissa, and one for AVD. After that, we've got PeakOS. So this is our full thin client operating system, which offers more flexibility and connectivity to multiple clients and applications, including VDI, DAS, and also local web apps. So this is what we predominantly use on the Tenzig hardware to be able to connect to the scale environment. So we can utilize either the Parallels client for that purpose, or we can also use the LeoStream Connect client as well, depending on which one you prefer. So those 2 operating systems are specific to Tenzig hardware. Then we have RepurpOS, which is pretty much the same operating system as PeakOS. The only differentiator is that it's available for third-party hardware, so you can repurpose those PCs and laptops to convert them to be a thin client to manage them using the Tenzig Manager software. We also again offer Windows as an alternative, and all of those again can be managed using the Tenzig Manager, which can be installed on premise but is also cloud ready to be deployed on somewhere like Azure or Amazon Workspaces or Google Cloud for that matter. So looking at our thin client hardware, so you'll find full details of our thin client portfolio on our website, but all of our hardware is Intel AMD based processors. So this gives us the maximum flexibility in performance. We have a mixture of different hardware options in traditional fixed thin clients, which are aimed starting off with task worker devices, going on to more knowledge worker endpoints, which cater for users that are using more UC type of applications such as Teams and Zoom. And then we also have options for power worker use cases where you need high-end graphics capability for things like 3D, CAD/CAM, video editing, that type of use case. We do have more specific specialized devices as well. So we have an all-in-one display offering, which is useful in education and the healthcare sectors in particular. And we also offer a laptop for mobility where there is demand for that with remote, hybrid or flexible working. Software features through our Tenzig hardware, pretty much across the board we can use Tenzig NOS operating system and PeakOS, and provide also Windows IoT to run on those devices. And again, they're still managed by the Tenzig Manager application. So RepurpOS, this is a great option for you to not necessarily chuck perfectly good hardware on the scrap heap. So with Windows 10 end of life on the horizon in October this year, Pretty much we're seeing a lot of interest in this right now. So for customers that want to continue using fairly decent up-to-date hardware, but don't have the TPM hardware to be able to facilitate Windows 11, they can potentially use repurpose on those devices to prolong the lifespan of them, and then connect to a Windows 11 desktop, which can be then deployed in your VDI or DAS environment using a virtual TPM. So repurpose is a fully secure operating system in just the same way as our Linux-based operating systems for our own hardware. Then we have the Tenzig Manager. So this is free, 100% free. So there's no subscription required for using the Tenzig Manager, and it's not dependent on the number of clients that can be managed or users that can access it. So it's very uncomplicated in its licensing. We also have Windows-based centralized management tool, but there is also going to be a Linux virtual appliance available, hopefully before the end of the first half of this year, but could be towards the end of 2025. So this is included with all of our Tenzig thin client hardware, and also with our repurpose operating system. So there is multi-tenancy available with the Linux virtual appliance, so that will be something that will be coming with that later in the year. But some of the main features of the Tenzig Manager is that you can utilize this to automatically deploy your Tenzig endpoints. You can also set up role-based access controls so that certain users have access to certain functionality of the Tenzig Manager. So for example, we could have administrators that can have access to the Tenzig Manager to change configuration settings, but we could then also have a separate group for help desk technicians who can then access just with the remote connectivity options to be able to provide support to those end users. So there is a foreshadowing function within the Tenzig Manager, which utilizes VNC to be able to shadow the endpoints securely from the Tenzig Manager console. You can also schedule tasks to perform processes out of hours, and we also support firmware updates through a method called distributed firmware versioning, which allows you to be able to push out the firmware to an endpoint at a remote location, and that can then push out the firmware locally to the remaining devices. So it won't consume all of your network bandwidth pushing out the firmware directly from the manager to all of those remote units. There is also some basic standardized reporting available within the application as well. But again, just remember that the Tenzig Manager is fully functional and free of charge. So Windows 11 IoT is an option for specific use cases where we prefer to use Linux where possible, but where it's not an option for the customer's use case, then we can offer Windows 11 IoT. So currently we support Windows 11 IoT LTSC 2024 Enterprise Edition. So this will give you peace of mind for support long into the middle of 2034 with its 10-year lifespan for support. So Tenzig tried to make the setup of the Windows devices for your VDI or DAS platform connectivity customized with options by Tenzig, where we can basically set up things that are specific to the IoT edition of Windows, such as the unified write filter or the shell launcher. So we have a specific account on there by default called the thin client user, which is a lockdown user account, which hides a lot of access to the back end of the Windows operating system, but that can be locked down further using some of the other Tenzig utilities available within the Windows image. We offer full support as well for creating custom Windows-based images for your environment, and we can also clone and deploy the Windows operating system using the Tenzig Manager application. There is also a package manager within the Tenzig Manager, which will also allow you to be able to update any clients that you're utilizing within the Windows operating system, and also potentially to run your Windows updates from there as well. So you can manage these devices using the Tenzig Manager. Alternatively, if you're already utilizing Intune, for example, then you can also manage these devices using that as well. So let's have a look at the Linux operating system then, which is pretty much our predominant operating system of choice. So we have an Ubuntu Lite variant that we call it. So this offers us the ability to be able to offer a sort of a user-friendly GUI to the end users, which you'll see in the quick start wizard and in the general usage of the operating system in the demo coming up. But the key thing is that this operating system is solely focused for EUC environments, so connecting to those VDI, DAS, virtual desktop environments. So we offer user launch pads for the majority of the clients connect environments such as Omnissa, Citrix, ABD, and we also have local web browser apps available, including Firefox, Google Chrome, Chromium, and Microsoft Edge. But the interface available for configuring the device is very simple and familiar to many people that are used to a Linux-based operating system or even Windows. So we've got configuration applets for all the main sort of peripherals that you may be connecting up to the hardware, and they're all accessible from the main control panel window, which can be locked down securely from your end users. So we also utilize a management agent. So this allows us to be able to manage those devices using the Tenzig Manager, which can either be on-premise or remotely deployed in the cloud, as mentioned earlier. But within the Linux build, we take advantage of low-level objects, basically to maximize the efficiency and processing of the network communications, hardware decoding, encryption, and things like that. So just a bit of background about the structure of the Linux OS that we're using. So again, we use that Ubuntu base for the kernel, and currently we're using 2204. This will be soon updated to the 2404 edition. But pretty much the structure of the file system uses squashfs packages, providing specific functionality. So as you can see on the right hand side here, we've got these different squash bundles, and they're basically designed for a specific purpose. So during initialization of the device, each squashfs is mounted at boot into the RAM of the device, and the flash drive contains a single bootable partition containing the kernel itself and the root file system with the squashfs packages. Now, this makes it very flexible for us when we're performing firmware updates moving forwards, because it means that when you push out a firmware update to a device, it only needs to update the packages that have altered from the current firmware that's running on that unit. So it can reduce the size of the firmware update that needs to be deployed to the device that you're upgrading. So just some key differences between sort of the standard Ubuntu Linux build and what we utilize within our Tenzig PicoS, NOS and repurpose operating systems is the bootloader. With Tenzig Linux, it uses syslinux rather than Ubuntu's grub. The window manager that we utilize is ICE, whereas in Ubuntu it uses GNOME. For Tenzig applications and scripts, we utilize two utilities to be able to display these. We use the Qt interface or HTML GUI for different interfaces that you will interact with within the operating systems. So the home directory defaults to the /temp folder, where we store all of our configuration files, and the kernel mounts the root file system into RAM. Custom boot scripts which mount packages to start the application services are integrated into the build, and all files are read-only, non-persistent, with the exception of that /tmp config folder. So very secure, immutable operating system. So Linux hardening, so security is a big topic at the moment with all areas in IT. So Tenzig's approach with Linux hardening is to lock down the system as securely as possible and basically allow the end user the option to be able to open up the operating system further if they wish to. Now you can further harden the operating system with various further features such as securing the access to the control panel using a password. So that will lock down access to the main system level functions, but you can still give the end user access to certain applets to be able to still manage their own desk space peripherals, things like displays, keyboards, mice, audio headsets, and things like that. We also support secure network access, so fully support 802.1x and SCEP within all of our Linux-based operating systems. And we consider additional authentication methods for VDI clients where possible. So, for example, taking advantage of multi-factor authentication, smart cards, or single sign-on using something like Imprivator. We also allow for remote shadowing from the Tenzig manager for support purposes. So this will basically be locked down, so you can only access it from the Tenzig manager console by default. Also SSH access is locked down, so it's not enabled. And also we lock down access to USB devices as well. So USB devices are only passed through to the virtual desktops by default. They can't use local storage on the device. If you want to install a file to the local operating system, you have to enable that first in the security settings. And over the right hand side here as well, it just shows the default network ports that are available on the client itself. So it's very locked down and only allows access to the application ports that are necessary on the client side. So we support a multitude of different VDI clients, so from Omnis Horizon, Citrix Workspace app, FreeRDP, AVD clients, HP Anywhere, Nutanix Frame, Parallels, LeoStream. So in particular for scale, we'll be looking at the Parallels and LeoStream clients. But we also have other clients for different connectivity, such as for VNC and also PuTTY, and we also have session management agents as well for Liquidware, Stratosphere, and Control Hub. So integrated into PeakOS and Repurpose, we also have web browser support with Google Chrome and Firefox, and also our own Chromium browser now. And we also support a multitude of UC plugins for things like Cisco WebEx, Cisco JVDI, and Teams Optimization and Zoom. So there's also support for SSO and security out of the box. So we have Imprivator integrated into our firmware, and also support for smart card integration. And we can also add additional support using 90-meter encryption as well where necessary. Management and network. So again, we've got the Tenzig agent to allow us to be able to manage our devices by the Tenzig manager. And then we've just got a WPA supplicant for wireless network access and SCEP daemon as well for your 802.1x SCEP enrollment. Just to talk about the Linux release cycle. So generally speaking, we release GA firmware sort of on a quarterly basis. That's the maximum time frame really. Sometimes it can be a lot sooner than that, so possibly on a monthly basis. But this GA firmware goes through a rigorous QA process before it is then published onto our website. So you can see here the link to download the latest firmware packages, and you can sign up for Tenzig's notifications email distribution list as well, where you'll get advance notice of when the firmware and also latest updates to the Tenzig manager are going to be published on the website. So all of our GA firmware is scanned for security vulnerabilities using Nessus, and you can find the latest of Tenzig's security vulnerability testing policy using this link here on this slide. So we also offer hotfix releases. So these are designed for fast response to potential bug fixes or feature enhancements requested by a customer. So they're only given out on request and privately before then they're rolled up into a general release, which is then published onto the website. We also offer add-ons as well for different client applications. So if a new client is available, but we're not releasing a new firmware build for a period of time to come, what we can do is package that client up into an add-on and make that available on our website as an alternative. So just to reiterate really the operating systems that we're sort of looking at here for accessing the scale environments. On the Linux side of things, predominantly we're looking at Tenzig PeakOS and RepurpOS. So this again offers that multi-connectivity and flexibility, so supports Parallels and also the LeoStream Connect client. It's got that support for web browsers locally as well. So if you want to access web apps, you can take advantage of that. And again, they're all managed by the Tenzig manager, very simply using configuration files and templates. So PeakOS is featured on all Tenzig thin client models, and Repurpose again is available for third-party devices. And it's got a simple and pain-free software and support subscription for RepurpOS. So you can buy a perpetual license for 1, 3, or 5 years for that particular product. On the Windows side of things, again, so you've got the Windows 11. Again, we can support Parallels and also the LeoStream apps on that imaging. It's got support for various browsers, supportive in Intune, and also has those IoT security features such as the unified write filter and shell launcher, which can be used to lock down the device and make it look operate as a more kiosk type of terminal. So let's move on to the live demo then, which will basically give a quick demonstration of our Tenzig PeakOS operating system with an out-of-the-box experience of how you can set it up for using LeoStream and Parallels to connect to a scale environment. And then we'll look at the Tenzig Manager console and how you can utilize that to quickly mass deploy your devices.
So to kick this demo off then, let's go through an out-of-the-box experience of a Tenzig thin client running PeakOS and just show how simple it is to connect to your scale platform using either the LeoStream Connect client or the Parallels client. We'll also look at customizing the device and also locking it down ready for your end users to use. So imagine you've taken your Tenzig thin client out of the box and connected it all up. You've turned it on and it's now booted up and sat waiting at this initial configuration wizard. So this will just take you through some prerequisite steps before then you will get access to the full desktop where you can configure the device further. So to continue, read through the end user license agreement and click agree. It will then do a network check and it will then bring you to this regional settings screen. So choose the country where the device will be used, and this will just set the keyboard layout predominantly in that region. You've also then got down the bottom here the preferred language choice. So by default this is set to English, but you can change it to Dutch, French, German, Italian, Portuguese or Spanish just to change the textual elements of the operating system. So again, when you're happy with the settings there, click next to continue. And it will bring us to the final screen where we can configure the date and time of our device. So you can automate this using an NTP server. Alternatively, you can configure it manually using the date and time settings here and also adjusting the time zone for your relevant region. Again, when you're happy, press next and that will then complete the initial installation wizard. So with the initial configuration wizard completed, you're then presented with a full desktop. So it's a traditional look and feel with the desktop window, and then along the bottom here we've got a taskbar. On the right hand side of the taskbar we've got a system tray with the time and access to the sound properties and network properties applets. Also there's access to a support information dialog which just gives details about your currently assigned IP address, its physical MAC address, the host name of the unit, and also the hardware and firmware being used. On the left hand side, we've just got power options and then access to the main menu and control panel. So let's go into the control panel, and you'll see that it is simply laid out into these three categories. So along the bottom here, we've got our system level operating system functions. In the middle window, we've got our hardware configuration applets, so we can customize the settings for any devices connected to our unit. For example, the displays. If we go into that applet, you'll see that we're using a GUI based on HTML, which means that what you see on the client side in these configuration applets is identical to what you will see when you go into the same configuration area within the Tenzig Manager, which we'll see later on. So just cancel that and come back to the control panel, and at the top here we've got our applications where we can create our client connections to the different environments and platforms that we want to connect to. So let's begin by going into new connection, and you'll see here the full list of clients that we can configure out of the box. So we can also add some additional items using add-ons. But as you can see here, the initial list is quite extensive. So we've got the LeoStream Connect and Parallels clients that we can configure for our Scale platform. So because some of you will be using either LeoStream and some will be using Parallels, what I'll do is I'll just create those two connections to Scale, and then we'll come back to it in a moment. So once you've created your connections, they will appear on the desktop, so you can access them directly from there. Now, what you can also do is change the modality of the PeakOS operating system. So as we see it now with the full desktop, with the background and taskbar along the bottom and the desktop shortcuts, you can use that as your preferred interface if you want to, but you also have some additional options available to you with PeakOS or repurpOS if you wanted to use them. So to change that, let's go down into the desktop applet, and within here, so you can change the background wallpaper from here if you wanted to. You can also go into the advanced section, and this is the item that we want to look at here, modality. So you can see here that we're currently using full desktop, which is this view that we see here. But if we just changed it to this option here, portal mode, then hopefully what you're currently seeing now in the top right hand corner of the screen, this is how the device will then boot up and present the connections to you. So rather than seeing the background of the desktop and the taskbar along the bottom, all you'll see is this portal type window interface which just lists the different connections that are available to the end user to access. So you can utilize that mode if you wish. For others, you might want a more automated method of connecting to your Scale platform using one of these connection types and using a more kiosk type interface. So if you want to utilize that, then we can set the modality here to kiosk mode, and once one thing that you need to do before you actually set it within this window here is you have to go to the connection that you want to use in the kiosk mode. So let's, for example, use this LeoStream Connect connection. If you right click on it, you can then go to startup options, and then what you can do is set this connection as the default connection and also enable connection auto start, and then when the device boots up, it should automate that connection and connect to the platform, or present you with the login window ready to connect to the platform automatically in that kiosk look and feel. So you've got three different types of modes available to you if you want to utilize those. So with the connection set up, now let's have a look at some other items that you can do. So you can customize the device for your own corporate imaging, for example. So if you wanted to do that, because the operating system is hardened and locked down by default, you first have to enable local USB usage by going into the security settings. So if on here you select enable install from USB, and then save. And then if you insert a USB into one of the ports on your client with the background wallpaper that you want to use, it will then bring up and present you with this USB installer. So again, because the operating system is secure and hardened, it doesn't give you free rein to install any type of application or file onto your device. It will only allow you to install specific file types, so things like network certificates, background images, printer drivers, firmware updates can all be deployed from the USB drive. So let's just change the background image. And we've just got a more pretty, somewhere I would like to be right now. Background now presented on the desktop of the device. So obviously, once you've installed that image, to customize it, you would then want to secure the device again further. So if we go back into the security settings, you can then disable install from USB to lock down the device again. But whilst we're in here, let's look at some other items that you can change. So obviously you can lock down the device further by blocking certain ports, which may be necessary if you perform any security scans on your network and it raises any potential vulnerability or warnings based on the port being used. Further down, we've got the ability to be able to lock down access to the control panel. So you can enter a password here, and this can be modified by the Tenzig manager as well. But then underneath you see these tick boxes, so you can still give the end user empowerment over their own desk space. So if they want to set up their own displays, if they want to change their headsets and hot plug them, or if they were a home user, for example, and wanted to connect to their wireless networks, then you can decide to give them access to these particular control panel applets. So let's enable display, we'll disable mouse and keyboard, and we'll leave the power option and network properties enabled. And then if we save that, and if we then close down the control panel, but then go back to the control panel, you've then got to enter the password to then gain access to the full settings of the system. So one thing that you will notice at the moment as well is that you can still, from this window here, create connections. So again, once you've created your Leostream or Parallels connection to your Scale platform, you can then restrict access so that end users don't see this as well. And again, that can be accessed from the security settings. And if you scroll down, disable connection configuration, and save that and close, and just refresh the desktop. And if we then go back to the menu, you'll see now that you don't have access to be able to add further connections to the client. So with this potentially prepared, you can then use the Tenzig manager to capture this configuration as a template to then deploy to further devices. But just to finish off here, let's just go back into the control panel and just mention some further items at the system function level. So we've got here the secure agent. So this allows the Tenzig Thin client to connect back to the Tenzig manager over a HTTPS tunnel, so that then you can manage those devices on larger enterprise networks that may block the ports normally used by the devices to communicate with the manager. But then also you can manage the devices over the internet as well if you wanted to. We've also got a fairly new feature within the Tenzig firmware, which is an event logger, which is a useful security auditing tool. So this can send outputted messages to a syslog server that you've got configured. So you can have system level functions for if a user modifies any settings of the devices. Also, if they connect any peripherals to the device, then these can be sent as messages to the syslog server. Also, if password access has failed or been successful, trying to sign into the control panel or into a VDI platform, then again, those audit messages can be transmitted. And then we've got some performance and network utilization login messages as well. So that's a useful feature now in the later 16.5.38.3 firmware. So further down, we've also got the VNC service, which just gives you the ability to be able to shadow the device from the Tenzig manager. So this is enabled by default, and it is secured so that you can only access the device by default from a Tenzig manager console. So let's say that we've got our device prepared. We then want to use the Tenzig manager to deploy further units. So what we'll do is now look at the Tenzig manager to capture a template and use a group to then deploy to further Tenzig devices. Okay, so here we are on our Tenzig manager server, which has been pre-installed. So let's go ahead and open up the interface which will allow us to manage our devices. So the Tenzig manager web console. And we just need to enter our credentials to sign in. And then we're presented with this main window. So it's split into these sections where you've got a list of any devices that have been detected by the Tenzig Manager server or registered automatically on boot. So they will be listed whether they're online or offline here. At the bottom, we've got a job log of any processes that have been performed by the Tenzig Manager against the client. So hopefully they will be successful, but if not, it will normally give you a descriptor as to where potentially the problem lies. So then you can go away and troubleshoot further. And then on the left-hand side here, we've got our groups as well. So these allow us to be able to logically manage the devices and also to be able to auto-populate and configure the devices automatically as well. So we'll come on to that in a moment. So just sticking with the main thing clients window here, as you can see, the details are listed. So this shows here with this padlock on the icon that the device is connecting back to the manager using that secure agent HTTPS tunnel. We see the host name of the device, its current IP allocated, its physical MAC address, the platform of the operating system family being used, the hardware model, the firmware version, and also any names of templates or that have been applied to the client and the date and timestamp of when they were applied. Also, we see hardware details about the device as well, how much storage and RAM is available on the client. So what you can do is right click here, and if we go down to system, you've got the option to reboot and shut down devices centrally from the Tenzig manager. Also, if this was internal on the network and you supported Wake on LAN magic packets, you can turn devices on remotely from the Tenzig manager server. If we go into configuration, we can retrieve the individual devices configuration as it is now. And then you can either go back to that menu and click edit or select the option from the toolbar at the top there. So if we go into edit, then we see the connection that we created. We see the three sections split across the applications, the hardware, and then the system level operating system functions as well. So you can go into any of these screens and modify the settings. So as I showed you earlier when we were looking at the local client and the display properties, the look and feel of what you see when you look at the same page in the Tenzig Manager is the same. So it gives you that unified GUI experience across devices and the management tool. So again, you can change any of the settings here and send those back to the device if you wanted to change the settings on an individual device only. Or the majority of the changes are done in real time. Only certain parameters like network configuration changes require a restart of the device. But once that is done, what we can then look at is how you can utilize a configuration from a single device to almost do no-touch deployment and automate the deployment of your further units. So what we would want to do first is generate a template of the client that we've got configured. So if we go to generate template, and we've got a template in there already, but I will create a new one. And then just click the create button. So that just creates a generalized configuration from the device, and we can get access to the templates from up here on the toolbar. So if we go in and select the template, so you can leave that as a golden image, as it were, if you wanted to, and create a copy. And it might be just to rename it as version 2 if you wanted. But then we can go in and we can modify the settings within here for this particular device. So if you wanted to, you could go into the security settings, and where we enabled some of the applets to be allowed for the end user to modify, we could lock those down so that they're not available to the end user. So once you're happy with the template configuration, we can come out of there, and then we can look at the groups over here on the left hand side. So if you right click and go to new group, we can give our new group a name. And then you've got these auto population filters. So these are applied against devices as they register into the manager server. So you've got filter by platform, whether it's using our Linux firmware or Windows, for example, filter by firmware versions, individual MAC addresses, hardware models, and we've also got filter by computer names, host names, or filter by IP address. So for the majority of customers using devices internally, they normally use groups split up by filter by platform and IP address ranges. So I'll go into here and I'll just add the range for my device currently being used. And then what we can do is, once that's been created, we see the group there, and you can either reboot the device and the next time it re-registers, it will run through the group rules and add any devices to applicable groups. Alternatively, we can go to the group and repopulate, and then it will check against all of the clients the rules on that particular group. So depending on how many devices you've got in your database, that may take a few moments, but as you can see here, it's discovered 2 devices on that address range and using Linux and added them into the Scale webinar group. So one of the devices offline, so that must have been one used previously, but then here is the device that we've currently been using. So if we wanted to configure this automatically, again, what we can then do is go back into the group properties and go to this tab here, client configuration, and you've got the option here to push out a template to the devices within a group. We can also change the host name of the devices dependent on the group that they're a member of, and also we can push out firmware and add-ons to the devices at a group level as well. So particularly useful if you've got a large quantity of devices and not necessarily deployed them all at once. If we've released new firmware in between that time, you can then assign it to the group along with a template, and it will be updated to latest firmware and get the latest configuration as set in the configuration settings. So let's set up a name here. So just do scale. You can either use an index value of a number of digits or a portion of the MAC address. So I'll just use a portion of the MAC address. And then what we'll do is add automatic client configuration and edit the configuration. And in here, we will then select the template that we just created, so version 2 here. And if we push that out to the device in a moment, it should then remove those items from the menu bar that we had earlier on. So again, what you could do is re-register the devices to push out that update, or we can reboot the device if we wanted to. So what I'll do is, just to show that, is go to System and then Reboot, and then that will push out a request to the client to reboot. So once that device reappears into the Tenzig Manager console, you can see here that the job log has just notified us that actually it's renamed the device automatically. So it's changed the host name to Scale, and then the last part of the MAC address, and it's applied that template that we just created as well. And looking here now, this is being updated, so the host name is now showing correctly, and also we've got our template name and date and timestamp of when it was applied. So that shows how we can quickly basically do an auto no-touch deployment of many devices just using a configuration template from a single device. So what we can also do with these devices is we can download log files from them remotely into the Tenzig Manager console, so particularly useful for troubleshooting purposes, especially if devices are deployed remotely, then they can be pulled into the Manager console and worked on where necessary. Also, there's the VNC function, which gives you the ability to remotely support the devices. So as a help desk technician, if they get a call on the help desk telephone number, they can locate the device in the Manager console and jump onto it and see what the actual end user is seeing on their end as well. So as you can see here, you can also interact with it just as you would do as if it was a local device. So you see now that the menu bar has had those applets that we had earlier for things like the display, the keyboard and mouse, and the network settings, and had them removed. So it's been locked down further than it was previously. But you can get access into the control panel by entering the password, and then you can make changes locally on the actual device itself if you needed to. So really useful support tool, and that's also backed up as well with the role-based access controls that are available with the Tenzig Manager server. So if we go into the Tenzig Manager program group, Tenzig Manager role administration, then with your Tenzig Manager server, when it's joined to your domain, you'll be able to pull through here users and groups from your Active Directory infrastructure and be able to set them with different levels of permissions as necessary. So by default, there are 2 groups available to you. So you have administrators, which, as you expect, have full control, so they can do things like remote operations, turning on, turning off devices, shadowing them for support, but they can also do the functions of being able to change client configurations and factory default devices, whereas the technicians, they are limited from the outset, so they can do the remote operations, but if you go into things like the client configuration, then you're much more restricted in what you can actually do. So you can use these 2 roles to begin with if you wish to, but you can create further roles and set the permissions granularly as you need. So that's really how we can use the Tenzig Manager to quickly deploy your devices for connecting to the Scale platform using the templates and the groups. Other things that you can do within the web console is in the summary screen here. So you can set up a wallboard just to basically give you sort of an indication of what your devices are available to you. So you can see what the hardware is across your thin zero client estate, and potentially what the different levels of firmware are. So it gives you a nice, easy GUI to be able to quickly see whether devices are out of date and require updating or not. So that's the Tenzig Manager, a quick overlook of the Tenzig Manager web console and how we can use this to quickly deploy devices connected to the Scale platform.
Okay, and we're back. So we're nearly at the end of this session. So just quickly got a couple of things to do, just a couple of polls, and then we'll wrap things up with the key takeaways and the Q&As. We've had a few questions from some people. So let's go into the poll question just quickly. Question 2 here. So that's, have you seen an increase in your VMware renewal? So if you can kindly reply to this, we'll leave it a few moments. Still getting answers coming in. Okay, seems to have settled down now. So some good indications there. So thank you for that feedback. I'll close that poll question off now. And then we'll just look at the key takeaways then really of what you've seen for today. So on the Tenzig side of things, we wanted to cover some key takeaways with today's webinar. So we wanted to sort of make you aware that we are a one-stop hardware and software vendor providing thin clients, not just desktop-based, but also mobile and all-in-one for onboarding with Scale environments. We also wanted to make you aware of repurposing your existing endpoints. So whether this is to provide a more secure, standardized, manageable experience for users, or alternatively, your existing endpoint lacks support for scale computing. And then finally, we just wanted to also reiterate that we provide a cost-effective endpoint solution without complex subscription models, offering security, standardized UX and management capabilities for connecting to Scale platform. And just a final slide on the key takeaways for yourself, Alex.
Absolutely. Yes, so we are an industry-leading VMware alternative and have been for over a decade now. So something we've been doing for quite some time. An incredibly simplified experience, very easy to deploy and manage. We are scalable, highly available. We have our own backup and DR strategy built in with no extra licensing. And we have the ability to fit on, again, these incredibly small form factor devices. So just about any kind of workloads, any kind of operating environment we can support.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex. So I'll just put up the final poll question and then we'll finish off with that Q&A. So would you like to receive a demo to test in your own environment for any of the following? And the options are Tenzig thin client hardware, Tenzig repurposed software, both Tenzig hardware and software, and Scale computing. Just leave that a few moments to run, get some answers in still. Okay, I'll close that one off then. So that's great stuff. Thanks for participating in those poll questions there at the end. So yeah, thanks very much for joining today, but just quickly have a look at some Q&A. Have we received any questions, Alex?
Quite a few. So if someone was interested in partnering with both of us, they're looking for more information. I assume we can follow up with them after this, but as far as Scale goes, we're 100% channel. We don't take anything direct, so we always use partners to help out with our customers. There's no minimum requirements or anything on our side, and we're very collaborative. So we'll work with your pace however you want to work that deal.
And probably a similar situation for us as well is that we are a partner-driven organisation. So really, the relationship would be with one of our partners. So we can put you in touch probably with the closest partner that's best suited for your region. So we'll be in touch on that.
Perfect. Another question, is SNMP available?
No, SNMP is not supported currently. There's no plans for it either. Really, Syslog provides a facility for collating information from the endpoint, and that does the job well enough at the moment. So at the moment, there's no plans for SNMP.
On the Scale side, we do have support for SNMP, SMTP, and Syslog as well. So on the infrastructure, yes. Asked about getting a document for the presentation. This recording will be sent out after at the conclusion, right?
That's right, yeah. So we'll be sending out a copy of the actual PowerPoint presentation that we've gone through, and also the recording will be made available to everybody as well. It'll also be accessible via the YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect. How would someone access a 10-zig demo device?
Okay, so you can request a 10-zig demo device on our website. You can submit a request from there directly from www.10zig.com. So I urge anybody who's looking potentially for a demo device to look there, but also we'll take the feedback from the poll requests that people have submitted as well, and we can probably follow those up afterwards as well.
Let's see. When a wallpaper is installed and set, will that pull the template in the manager if you generate a template?
Yeah. Any wallpapers or files that you've imported into the client, that's all captured in the template as well. So what you see on one device that's been customized in that way is exactly what you'll see on other devices where the template's been deployed to.
Okay. How about all of the above demos, Scale with 10-zig?
How about all the, yeah. We can probably facilitate that. So if they're after some demo devices, then we can be in touch after the session just to get that arranged potentially.
Absolutely. Last one I see here, I think it's for me. Can I use my current hardware now hosting VMware hypervisors with Scale, or do you have to use prepackaged hardware? It's a great question. At this exact moment, we are the physical appliance, so our hardware on this, or our software on the hardware. That's how we've done it from the get-go. But we are about to wrap up a beta of a hardware compatibility list. So here, the new feature, yes, you will be able to take our hypervisor, install it on the approved hardware, and repurpose your existing hardware. And we also, for customers that do have newer hardware, we also have some incentives during the quoting process to help recognize the financial investment on that hardware as well. So there's a couple ways we can handle that. The best thing there would just be to reach out to your Scale rep and go over your specific details, and we can take it from there. But yeah, this Broadcom thing has it's put our engineering team in, it's rearranged their priorities for sure.
That's great, thanks. Any more?
I think that's it for the questions.
Okay. Well, so we'll wrap things up then now. So on behalf of 10zig, just want to say thanks to Alex for participating in this webinar with me today, and also to everybody joining out their days as well for taking the time to join. So big thank you to all of you, and look out for new content coming from 10zig and Scale coming up in the months ahead. Okay. I'll end the session.
Thank you. Take care.